Hello friends, welcome back to my channel Power of AEM. In the previous video, we have discussed what could be the problem statement. And in this video, we are going to take a deep dive on each step of the production pipeline. So before we understand how we can reduce the overall time execution, before that, we need to understand the different steps and where we can do the improvisation. As you know, multiple steps are available in the production pipeline. We can segregate those steps into different categories. One, which we can manage as a customer, and the other, which is with Adobe only. So the very first step, whenever we are starting or triggering our pipeline for production or might be non-production, the very first step is validation. After that, we are having build and unit testing. The third one could be for you the code scanning. So these first three steps are common in both of the pipelines, production and non-production. After that, it will create a build. And whenever it is creating the build, that is with Adobe operations, and we are not having any control. They are doing some different processes in order to creating the environment and deploying the the packages. So everything is coming with the Adobe. And after that, on production, they are also hitting the functional testing that is with them only. A part of that, when these steps are completing, it is coming back to the customer managed steps, which are functional testing and the UI testing. After that, audit trail is something, or you can say experience audit, where we are checking different lighthouse kind of reports, which they are providing in the pipeline, but configuration should be done by customer, but everything is in Adobe managed environment, so they are managing it. And after that, it will be available on your production once you provide the approval. So these steps I have segregated in two different categories. Here we are focusing only on the steps which are with customer, because we can do some changes on these steps in order to reduce the overall execution pipeline time. So let's talk about first what could be the best timeline that you want to achieve. In the previous video, we have seen the overall time was taking around 16 hours, more than 15 hours, and that was consistent across each execution of the production pipeline. And we noticed that the build and unit test phase was taking more than 30 minutes. However, we have reduced, after some changes, we reduced that to below 15, which was 50% reduction on the same step. Code scan, again, that was taking some time, and we reduce, and now it is taking 7 to 8 minutes for us, but let's take a realistic figure. So it should be 10 to 15, because there are different factors as well, and that is the reason we are considering this. Functional and UI testing, it should not be skipped. First thing is that if you are skipping, then it is not a good for production pipeline. Might be your pipeline will not execute very cleanly. So there are some different strategy that you can think on. And if you are thinking for the smoke pipeline, or sorry, smoke testing, in that scenario, it should take less than 10 minutes. And if you are having very less number of use cases, might be you can complete within some minutes. Experience audit, again, it is considerable with us. However, it is executing on the Adobe infrastructure, but whatever we are providing, it should be completed within 10 minutes. However, it generally takes very less time to complete as per our configuration, because we are having only one website, and based on that, we are able to complete within 2 to 3 minutes. But if you are having more websites that you want to configure in the experience audit, it might take more time for you. So let's talk about the first step, which is built in unit testing. And as you can see in the screenshot, it was taking uh, 30 minutes, and that is one of the execution, and some of the execution was taking 45 minutes too. But 30 minutes was the very minimal time. Whenever we were executing, that much time it was considering to complete this step. Now let's think why it is taking too much time to execute. There could be different reasons based on your overall implementation. You might have different multi-module structure of your project, or might be you are having some extra dependencies which are taking too long time to pull out. And whenever it is trying to make a build, during that time it was taking long time to provide all the dependencies. The next one could be related to not having the caching on different artifacts, might be your node modules that you are having. Another reason could be your unit testing are not optimized. Might be you are having lots of test cases, and those are in actual hitting some services or doing some input output operations, and that is the reason it is stuck on the JUnit executions. So these could be possible scenarios or cases for you in order to check why that is taking too long time. Now let's talk about how we can reduce that. When we are talking about reduction of the overall timeline, you need to take a look on two broader category. One is the Maven optimization, where we are talking about how we can reduce the dependencies. For example, if you are having any external dependencies or any other dependency that you want to pull and keep in your M2 directory multiple times, as you are keep updating those and having multiple version of it, make sure those are very streamlined and not having very frequent changes. And whenever you are having any dependencies, make sure those executions you are doing frequently, so M2 directories are always up to date and not having or not seeking for any further kind of version that you are having in order to complete your dependency. If you are having any unnecessary modules in your profile, make sure your profile should be very clean up and very crux in order to pull out the required stuff for your build execution. And if you are having any mirroring of any of the external repos, then make sure those are streamlined too in your setting.xml, because we have seen if you are pulling out some dependencies or any external jars which are very much required for your project, in such cases those are taking time and your dependencies are not solving, and that is the reason the execution phase is stuck on a particular step. Talking about unit test cases, and it was taking too long time for us. Why it was taking too long time? Because we were having lots of JUnit test cases and all were executing in sequential way. So how we can take some action on that? Make sure we are not hitting the actual APIs if you are having any external connections, and not doing any input output operation in actual. Instead of that, you are having some mock data, and based on that you are traversing in order to test the API. And same for the input output operation, where you are doing the input output operation kind of stuff, but in a very limited way. Only critical JUnit test cases we need to run on the production, instead of saying I need to provide the coverage till 50%, as that is a benchmark of Adobe to complete or to pass the that particular step. So make sure we are not hitting all the test cases at a time. Full regression tests you can hit on non-production pipelines. But if we are talking about any other kind of execution, make sure you are just passing the step. Instead of that, you are hitting only the required JUnit test cases. Second part, you can also think on how we can run the JUnit test cases in a parallel way. There are different settings available, which will give you opportunity to run the test cases in concurrent way. So just turn on those settings. Might be you are using JUnit or Mockito. So for that, you can enable your code concurrent execution, and by that way, you can increase the execution time for JUnit test cases. Let's move to the next phase of the pipeline, which is code scanning. And when we are talking about code scanning, it generally also considered as a customer managed step, and why some pipelines are taking long time on that particular steps, because we might have some redundancy on our code base. Might be we are having different sonar rules that is again checking against each and every code base. We are having a big code base and we are not sanitizing or not looking at those code base and having some unused code. So the better way is, in order to improvise the execution time on the code scan, we have to be very sure our rules are very optimized and very compliant to the Adobe Cloud Manager instructions. We need to split out our rules based on our different modules. For example, if we are having front end, then we need to test those stuff on the front end instead of testing it on the back end. Same for the back end. In the code hygiene, we need to look at always which code is not in use or might be where we need to do some factor refactoring, because sometimes what happens, we are having lengthy code which might be transformed in a very cleaner and shorter method that should be pretty much required. And if you are having any duplicate code, it could be related to your component, backend services, client library, or any other stuff that you are having in your code base. Make sure those are not having, or you are having only the unique feature related code. So by using or by taking all those steps, you can reduce the overall code scanning timeline. And what we have seen in our code base, we did the migration, and because of that, we were having some legacy code and some unused code which are not pretty much compatible or not exactly, executable on the cloud. We need to transform and short that particular code, because earlier we were using lengthy methods to complete the execution of some functionality. However, we came to know that if we are going to leverage the latest Java code statements, by that we can reduce the overall statements, and it will also give us the less time to execute the functionality. So we observed all of these things, and based on that, we took the time, and we also streamline our code after that, and reduce the duplicacy on our code. By using that, we reduce the timeline of execution at that particular step. Moving on the next step, which is related to the custom functional and UI testing. And if I'm talking about why that step is really required, because we have seen generally we are skipping that, and we are skipping that, it means we are either not completing the pipeline execution or manually intervention we are going with. So what we have observed, at least you should have a case which, or a couple of cases that are pretty much required for you in order to pass the functional testing, instead of running everything, because that again take some time to complete. So we took this strategy where we divided two different suite, where we are talking about, if we are going with the non-production pipeline execution, we can go with the full regression, the containerization testing tool, as we were using Selenium and Cypress both. So for some execution, we were going with the Cypress, and for some, we are using the Selenium. So In which case, for example, if that is a production pipeline and we need to complete that with only certain scenario which are pretty much required, or you can say MVP feature of our product, then only we are taking in consideration for the production pipeline, and the full test case execution or full functional unit UI testing execution we took for non-production pipeline. And that is how we strategize and reduce the overall timeline on the custom functionality. So the thing is that we need to look at which strategy will work for us, which are MVP feature for your product, and which test cases you want to execute for production and for full regression execution. Moving on the last step, which is related to experience audit. And when I'm talking about the experience audit, it is again, you can skip that, but it is not visible to skip, because again that is one of the feature providing by the cloud manager pipeline to validate how compatible your website in terms of the overall web vitals analysis. So when we are talking about this particular step, it is running the Lighthouse plugin in order to find out the overall score on performance, accessibility, SEO, and best practices. So it is also giving us the information where we need to do some improvisation. For example, if we are having any JS or CSS which are not uh, compliant, or having non following the modern browser compatibility, or might be some assets which are not as per the next gen requirement, or where we need to do some improvement in order to provide a different dimensions or renditions of the image. All those information you can pull out from this particular step. So I would suggest to at least have that, even though if you are having any console error and you are not regularly checking, this particular tool will explain to you which headers and which resources are blocked. So everything you can get it from this particular step. So this should be very required kind of step, though we are not utilizing, but we decided at least we are going with the home URL of our website, and by using that we can pull out all the information, and it is taking less than 5 minutes for us to complete now. And in case if you are having multiple websites, think for that like how you want to go with, because it will take extra time. If you are considering one website against 5 website, it generally takes time. So you need to consider which website you want to execute, or you want to consider in the configuration of audit, experience audit. So by doing these uh, steps, or taking all those actions against those discussed steps, we reduce the overall timeline of our production pipeline. And I hope if you are facing similar kind of challenge, those steps will also be helpful for you. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe my channel.